Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Welcome back, everyone. It is our custom to go around the room and say our names. My name is Grisha.
Hi, Mama.
Matthew.
Steve.
Jeffrey.
Stephen.
Andy.
Bob.
Michael.
Daniel.
Tony.
Jim.
I'm Richard.
Jack.
Howdy.
My name is Mark.
I'm Brad.
And online we have David, Christian, Francis, Don, Tom, Tyler, Michael, Jeff, John, Frisco, Samuel, Jeffrey, and Dice. Welcome to everyone in person and online. And it's my pleasure to introduce Dale Borglum, who founded and directed the Hanuman Foundation Dying Center in Santa Fe, New Mexico, the first residential facility in the United States to support conscious dying. Working with Ram Dass and Stephen Levine, Dale helped found the conscious dying movement in the West. He has been the executive director of the Living Dying Project in Santa Fe since 1986 in the San Francisco Bay Area. He is the co-author with Ram Dass, Daniel Goleman, and Dwarka Boner of Journey of Awakening, a meditator's guidebook, Bantam Books, and has taught meditation since 1974. Dale lectures and gives workshops on the topics of meditation, healing, spiritual support for those with life-threatening illness, and on caregiving as spiritual practice. He has taught with Ram Dass, Stephen Lang, Joan Halifax, Robert Thurman, Joanna Macy, Jack Cornfield, Anne Lamott, Jai Uttal, and many others. He has a doctorate degree from Stanford University, and you can learn more about the Living Dying Project at www.livingdying.org. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the kind invitation. Lovely to see so many people here. I'd like to talk today about being a bodhisattva, or a warrior of compassion. There has just been an election that I'm sure everybody is well aware of. And I would guess that most people in this room fall on one side of the political divide. But one way or the other, there are almost certainly a lot of emotions that have come up in relationship to the election. And even one of them, predominantly for many people, is probably grief. Particularly if you live in a community that might be marginalized by a repressive government. There are a lot of emotions that can arise in response to looking forward to what might be happening in our society in the years to come. So, Buddhism, of course, has some very clear teachings about working with emotions, and I would like to go through a summary of a very direct way to use emotion as a healing process. And in fact, in Vajrayana Buddhism, they say that the stronger the emotion, the greater the opportunity for awakening. So we have a big chance for great awakening coming up here. There's no way to make a dreadful situation pretty, but we can use the pain of it to recognize our sameness with other people. Shantideva, the Tibetan saint, said that since all sentient beings suffer from strong conflicting emotions, and all sentient beings get what they don't want and can't hold on to what they do want, and all sentient beings have physical distress, then why am I making such a big deal about just me? So, is it possible to use the pain of what we're feeling as an opening into a feeling of our connectedness? In Buddhism, there are basically three main schools, three main historical developments: Hinayana or Theravada Buddhism, which is Vipassana, mindfulness practice; Mahayana, Zen practice, which brings in compassion; and Vajrayana Buddhism, which is Tantric Buddhism. So that each of these three schools progressively is looking at ways of dealing with emotions in an increasingly sophisticated way. There are some studies that show in very obvious ways that the more mindful one is, the greater the sense of well-being. You have better sleep, better health, better relationships, etc. Other studies have shown that if you add compassion, now there's two things to do: pay attention and be compassionate, then the movement into well-being happens more quickly and deeply. And a third study done right before the pandemic shows that if we bring in meditations on emptiness, a more tantric approach, that in fact it even speeds up the movement into freedom more quickly. So, there is a notion in Mahayana Buddhism called the bodhisattva, a warrior of compassion, not a warrior of aggression, but a warrior of compassion. Compassion has certain defining qualities. And even beyond that, I'd like to define compassion, because it kind of surprises me that after talking about compassion for so many decades, a lot of people don't even know what compassion is. Would anybody care to define compassion? All you Buddhists here in the room. Older Buddhists. Long-time Buddhists.
My own thought is it's an ability to feel for and about someone without, without getting too involved.
Well, that's kind of pointing in slightly the right direction, but...
In the talk we had the other day, I heard something that made a lot of sense to me. There's empathy and there's compassion. And empathy is really feeling. What you're feeling, what the other is feeling. But compassion is the next step of actually doing something, or that's not the right word.
Getting closer. Maybe I'll jump in.
Thank you.
Okay. So, compassion is exactly the same thing as loving kindness, but in the context of suffering. Okay, so when you're loving somebody else, that's love. When that person is suffering, or when you are suffering, and the heart is open, that's compassion. Compassion is the open heart meeting suffering. My dear friend Stephen Levine poetically called compassion keeping your heart open in hell. Okay, so empathy, you can feel somebody's pain. You're walking down the street here in the Mission District, you see a homeless person, fentanyl addict, somebody having a really hard time, and you feel that must be difficult, but I don't want to open my heart up to that because that's too scary. I don't want to feel that anymore. I've got enough suffering of my own. I don't want to open to that. Compassion doesn't necessarily mean doing something. Often it does. But it's allowing the heart to be touched by the suffering of someone else or your own. And then if action comes out of that, that's compassionate action. Sometimes the compassionate thing to do is to do nothing. I work with dying people. And initially I thought my job was to jump in and rescue people. And I found out that that was often slowing down the healing process for people, because often somebody needed to feel the suffering more acutely before they were able to move forward. So that in the 12 steps, which I'm not a big expert on, but the first step is something like I'm admitting my life is out of control. I'm not being able to deal with this too well. I'm turning my life over to a higher power. You're admitting that you're lost in suffering. And that's the first step then to being able to feel compassion. Compassion really has two levels. First level is relative compassion. There are all kinds of practices in Buddhism to cultivate compassion. There's Tonglen. There are other direct compassion practices. Relative compassion. I am feeling compassion for you, for this group, for Republicans, feeling compassion for Donald Trump. When you die, Donald Trump is going to be at your bedside smiling at you. Metaphorically. And any place where that thought causes you to automatically react is going to make it harder for you to die. My friend Ramdas had a picture on his altar. He had pictures of Buddha, and there's Maharaji, and there's Hanuman, and there's Christ, and there's Donald Trump. Okay? And can he look at each of these pictures and keep his heart open? If seeing the picture of Donald Trump automatically closes your heart, that really isn't about Donald Trump, that's about your heart. Now, opening your heart doesn't mean you approve, you like, that you're not going to protest, you're not going to be active, you're not going to do what you can do. But it means you're doing it from an open heart. And when we think about the people in history who have had great effect, Abraham Lincoln, Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, they're people who had an open heart, who approached injustice from a place of open-heartedness. Okay, so how can we do that? There's another level of compassion, which is absolute compassion. It's not something we're doing, it's who we actually are. And in fact, Buddhism, in some superficial way, can look like a rather pessimistic religion, right? The first noble truth is that life is suffering. Okay. But underlying Buddhism is the notion that really all you have to do is pay attention. That all you have to do is be mindful, and that will purify and reveal this underlying basic goodness that is at the heart of each of us. Even though in some people, we don't have to mention any names, that basic goodness seems to be veiled pretty deeply. Okay. So there is this assumption that if we just pay attention and if we cultivate relative compassion, it will reveal this deeper sense of compassion, that this who we are, compassion with a capital C. And in fact, theoretically, they say that when one gets enlightened, the fully awakened mind has three qualities. One of the qualities is great clarity. It's the knowing quality. You know exactly what's going on. The second quality is spaciousness, no clinging. But the third quality is naturally arising compassionate activity. If you're awake, what you will be doing is compassionate activity, because you will be connected with the suffering that is around you. Now, usually, traditionally, compassion is taught as compassion for the other. But in the West, we have to realize that for many of us, we need compassion for ourselves, self-compassion before, or at least at the same time, we're cultivating compassion for someone else. Compassion has three defining qualities. There's a lot of threes here. The first one is a feeling of connectedness. Is your heart connected? Right now, do you feel connected to yourself? Do you feel connected to the people in the room? Do you feel connected to, may I dare say in this temple of Buddhism, connected to God, or to the One, or to the Source, or to whatever that nameless name is? Okay. Do you feel connected? The second quality of compassion is your heart spacious? Which means there's no clinging, right? I say Trump, and there's not like that. There's that guy, he's doing that thing, and my heart can stay open. And the third quality of compassion is a warm heart, a heart that's not cold, a heart that's moved by the suffering that's around. The quality that makes it hard to keep the heart open is grief. Rumi, the wonderful Persian poet, said in one of his poems, grief can be the garden of compassion. A garden is a place where something nutritious or beautiful grows. He's saying grief can be where compassion grows. Grief is the negative emotions that arise when we feel separate. Everybody in this room is grieving. Almost everybody I've ever met in life is grieving. Even if you have some remarkable life where no one close to you has ever died, we have all lost a lot. Compassion, as I mentioned, is the quality of feeling connected. So that one big chunk of the spiritual path is, first of all, being aware of what we're feeling, how we tend to run away from being present, and then being connected through the heart to that feeling in ourselves. So we're transmuting feelings of grief and separation into feelings of connectedness and compassion. The challenge here is that in order to feel connected to something, we have to feel it in the first place. And there is so much momentum behind automatically, almost automatically, in a very conditioned way, running away from the places that bother us. So that the first part of practice, mindfulness, is beginning to train ourselves to be with the places that scare us, to be with the places that are difficult, to be with the places that are challenging. Mindfulness seems like a very straightforward notion. Watch your breath, watch your movements, watch your mind. But for many of us, emotions, difficult emotions, and even in a more difficult way, pleasant emotions, are very hard not to get lost in. I'd like to read 3 short quotes. Gandhi. What you do is insignificant, but it is very important that you do it. Edmund Burke. The worst mistake is to do nothing, because you can only do a little. And finally, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, one of my early meditation teachers. You must stand halfway between hope and hopelessness. Hopelessness in the sense that we can't hope this moment is any different than it is, because it is. We can hope that things get better in the future, but as long as we're hoping that it's not this way, we're really wasting our time, because it is this way. The hopelessness of surrendering fully into the moment is very challenging. And I have found that many people, and even particularly meditators, have a hard time doing that because in the West, we're not particularly embodied. We tend to be up in our heads. There is a collection of short stories by James Joyce called The Dubliners, in which there's a man named Mr. Duffy, and the line is, Mr. Duffy lived a short distance from his body. Okay. We all know Mr. Duffy. We all are Mr. Duffy at times, living a short distance from our bodies. Is it possible to be embodied? I remember once I was at a Tibetan empowerment, and the Lama said, okay, we're going to do a practice here now to open our hearts, so everybody think about your mother. And he said, oh, wait a minute, this is America. Thinking about your mother doesn't mean your heart's going to be open. And it can be kind of funny, but is there anything sadder than that? That where he comes from, you think about your mother and your heart springs open. In America, maybe yes, maybe no, right? So that there are very different psychological, physical challenges to practice here than there are in, say, Tibet or India or other places, or particularly Tibet or India during the times when these scriptures were written. These scriptures were written by and for Asian people who were walking around barefoot. There's one barefoot person here. By and for Asian people who were barefoot, who loved their mothers, who didn't have an iPhone, who probably slept in the bed with their parents for a really long time, and they had a very different relationship with their bodies. They had a whole different set of circumstances and problems than we do. So that it's assumed you're grounded and centered before we begin this big project of disidentifying with ego structure and identifying with true nature. So I would really encourage people to explore the possibility of bringing embodiment, groundedness, centeredness into your meditation practice. According to my introduction, apparently I've been a meditation teacher for 50 years now. 1974, I did some subtraction there during the introduction. 50 years meditation teacher, and I'm still this neurotic. Okay, so good luck to all of us. But what I'm saying is that what I have learned, and I have a PhD in mathematics. I'm not saying that in bragging rights, but kind of pointing out what that did to my mind, that it took me a long time to realize that I needed to get into my body, to get out of my head, to stop being Mr. Duffy, and appreciating that there was something maybe wiser and deeper than the mind that thought it knew so much. Okay. So, I mean, right now as we're speaking, I'm speaking, you're listening. Okay. Is it possible to drop down into the root? As you're breathing out, drop down into the earth that supports and nourishes, not the earth of dirt and rocks and worms, but feel that sense of groundedness. Inhabit the root chakra, the antidote to fear. And can you feel it, even just by saying that, and people begin to explore it, how the room changes? How the energy got quieter, just like that. I'm saying things that are hopefully mostly pretty interesting, and it's easy to get caught in, oh, what Dale's saying, and can you hear the words from that place of centeredness? And a lot of Buddhist practice, particularly Zen practice, is done from the place of being centered, from the hara. Dropping down into the lower belly. Martial arts are done from the belly. The martial art of being you, the martial art of being a Democrat, being a gay person, being a whatever you are in this current climate. The martial art of being that. Okay, so there are teachings then about how to deepen this quality of compassion. The first stage of practice, mindfulness practice, Theravada, Hinayana practice, it's about no more struggle, about watching how you tend to run away. What does it feel like? Where do you run to? Do you run to Netflix? Do you run to another bad relationship? Do you run to a great bottle of wine? Now, it's certainly possible to enjoy wine and to enjoy Netflix and to enjoy another bad relationship. Because in a certain sense, the bad relationship is preferable to feeling how afraid you are. to keep all the chaos there, to keep from dropping into what's underneath that. What are we trying to get away from? Is it possible to begin to feel that urge to run away rather than surrender into the hopelessness of this is the way things are right now? And there's a slogan in Tibetan Buddhism, using poison as medicine, right? That we have this poison of, I've got to get away from this, but that's the medicine to bring us more fully into the present. And then, even beyond that, appreciating that all emotions are just awakened energy. In Vajrayana Buddhism and Tantric Buddhism, it said that all emotions are healing. There's not good emotions and bad emotions. Some are pleasant, some are unpleasant. But they're all there to tell us something. If we can be aware of what it feels like, not run away from it, and open our hearts to, okay, I'm feeling anger, I'm feeling grief, I'm feeling sadness, I'm feeling whatever it is. What is the message there? There are a series of teachings in Tibetan Buddhism called Lojong, or the mind training slogans. And I'd like to just very briefly go through a couple of these slogans. One of them is, be grateful to everyone. Now that's a tough one. It's kind of like in the Bible, it says, turn the other cheek. Or all the religions say, when somebody bothers you, that's good news, because you're having to look at your propensity to be bothered. In this moment, in every moment, are we operating from, I'm bothered, I've got to do something about it, or from that place of being centered, being grounded and open-hearted? There's another slogan, it's a very clunky translation, but here it goes, drive all blames into oneself. And what that means is, as long as we're blaming the environment for how we're feeling, healing isn't happening. Cancer doesn't cause suffering. Resistance to cancer causes suffering. Republicans don't cause suffering. Resistance to Republicans cause suffering. Okay, two people can be stuck in the same traffic jam, both of them equally needing to get to an important job interview, needing the job equally much, and they both get stuck in this traffic jam and they're both going to be late. And one of the persons saying, oh my God, why does this always happen to me? And starts swearing and pounding on the steering wheel. And the other person says, this is really a drag, but there's nothing I can do about it, so I might as well play some music and relax, because I'm not going to get there any quicker by being upset. It's the same traffic jam. Or two people have cancer, or two people have a root canal. And they have very different emotional responses to what it is that's going on. What is the best way to keep the heart open? Now, the heart can be opened in various ways. Devotion is the easiest way to open the heart, because in devotion, we're opening our heart to that which is love, to God, to Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, to the lovable. The next easiest way to open the heart is loving kindness to other people. Hardest way to open the heart is compassion, because we're opening our heart to suffering, which is what we're kind of conditioned to not open our hearts to. Okay. So to keep the heart open in a sustained way really requires letting go of the hope for fruition, that what we're doing is going to change things out there. We do the best we can, and then we leave it up to the universe, we leave it up to God, to what happens next. That's, in a way, the whole message of the Bhagavad Gita. You do what you do, but you renounce the fruits of your actions. So we're really surrendering fear and struggle, right? Can we do what we do and let go of struggling? You do the best and then you let go. So Where's that? Okay. Here's a short poem by Hafiz. He says, I wish I could show you, when you are lonely or in darkness, the astonishing light of your own being. I wish I could show you that. So we have about 15 more minutes. I can keep talking, but let's open this to questions and discussion. See if there's some of that. And then I'd like to do a little plug of the Living Dying Project. We have some events coming up that I'd like to tell you about. So any remarks or questions? Becoming a warrior of compassion. This is a great opportunity in this confusing, chaotic time that we're in. And when I got up today, I was eating breakfast, I turned on CBS News, and there was Trump in France for the Notre Dame reopening, and he was saying to Macron, or however you pronounce the prime minister's name over there, he's saying, we're sure living in a crazy world, aren't we? And the French guy's looking at him. Mr. Articulate. Okay, so most of us have been practicing a long time. We have tools. Now is the time to use them. Now is the time to be a force for compassion, a warrior for compassion. I remember once, I used to teach before the pandemic. I had a class every Monday night in the Mission District at the corner of Valencia and 18th, something like that, at a friend's house. And the parking, as you know, is really bad there. So I'd have to get there early because I didn't know how long it was going to take to get a parking place, right? So I got there, I got a parking place immediately. I was walking up Valencia Street, 6 o'clock, summer evening, warm, a lot of people going up and down the street, people have their phones out, people are talking. And there was one guy standing next to a shop on the side, on the corner, the edge of the sidewalk. And I just was shocked by him. He didn't say anything, he didn't move, but he was so clearly centered and present in comparison to the chaos I was feeling in the minds of everybody around me, that it just woke me up a little bit. We can be that person. The world needs that. I have a friend who lives in Santa Fe who, I know I keep saying that they're going to be Q&A and I keep talking. Okay. I have a friend who's living in Santa Fe. She has a big house there. She says, Ramdev, it's my other name, please move to Santa Fe. It's so much calmer here, climate change, and California's so crazy, and you'll be so much happier here. I used to live in Santa Fe. I love Santa Fe. It's one of the only places in America I really feel at home is northern New Mexico. I feel like I'm a visitor here in California. But I want to be where the action is. I've been given the blessing of the teachings, right? And I feel like I want to be where I'm needed. I don't want to retreat to Santa Fe. I don't want to try to get away from the shit that's hitting the fan. Okay, remarks, questions, jokes, anything.
We have two folks online. Did you want to go first?
Okay, I guess my question is, we can do the work on ourselves, and I understand that, about making ourselves available. But I guess the problem for me is knowing when to actually make myself available to somebody who could maybe use some insight or compassion that I have in my infinite wisdom, but they're not necessarily open to hearing about.
Right. Okay, well, you said infinite wisdom, probably jokingly, but let's actually assume you do have infinite wisdom. And compassion is not an emotion. Compassion is not something you shoot at this person and not at that person. It's a state of being, which has to include you. So here you are with your friend who's having a hard time, say, and you're asking, should I do something or not? Should I try to fix this person or help this person? And what I would suggest is exactly what we've been talking about here. Step one, become embodied. What does it feel like right now to be you in relationship to this person? Letting go of the narrative, letting go of the story, letting go of being Mr. Duffy. And here you are sitting, having sensations in your body as you're in relationship with this other human being. What does that feel like? And then can you open up your heart of compassion, which is not only in relationship to that person, it's in relationship to you. So there's compassion, which includes you, includes the other person, includes Donald Trump, includes the environment. And out of that, can you trust then whatever action comes? It might be doing nothing. It might be saying no. It might be saying yes. If any of you are a parent, or you know parents, or you had a parent, you know that if you raise a child and always say yes, you're going to raise a monster. You have to say no. It's easy to say yes with an open heart. It's easy to say no with a closed heart. Can we say no with an open heart? So I don't know if you're going to say yes or no. It depends on that moment and trusting this absolute bodhicitta, this absolute compassion that is your true nature, that goes beyond what the thinking mind is telling you, the deeper wisdom.
Jeff online has a question.
Yeah.
Hi there.
You were talking about doing math, and I was thinking that while you were talking, I really appreciate your talk. And for the first time, I just have another level of sort of grokking what you said about grief, and that the negative response to feeling separate, and feeling separate, I don't know anything more painful than that, and grief being the route into that garden or the route to reconnecting. And I just flashed on you in 1982 at Fort Flagler, Washington, my first roundhouse retreat, and you talking about the dying center and appreciating the history there. But I also, like I said, I really appreciate how many times you've laid that out, and how real it feels. So thank you.
You're welcome. Do you remember that retreat when that woman came up and slapped me in the face in front of everybody?
Sophie.
So Jeff said grief is the negative response to, what did you say the negative was?
Feeling separate.
Yeah, the negative response to feeling separate. And I don't think, and in fact I think it's very important to not think of grief as negative. Grief is a healing process. It's a difficult process, but it's not a negative process. Might be unpleasant, but can we consciously grieve? If you can't consciously grieve, you're not going to be able to feel compassion. So to think of grief as something to get away from is going to really slow down the healing process.
I meant unpleasant, yeah.
Yes, please.
About the slap?
Pardon? It's a whole long story. There was a woman there who came with somebody, and the somebody left with her, took the first person's meds, and the second person was off her meds. She was kind of crazy, and I was kind of the designated slappy in front of a room of a couple hundred people. I don't remember exactly how it happened, but I was talking to her and like that, and I just apparently anyway.
So, first of all, thank you for the wonderful talk.
You're welcome.
And because of a recommendation from our retreat teacher, not the most current one, but I guess it was a year ago by now, I've been reading a very intense text on dependent origination. And, I mean, I never remember the names of these things. And so for me, it raises the same issues as the concepts which we barely discussed, I think, of relative and absolute reality.
Yes.
And as determinism and free will, for that matter.
Yes.
In the West. And so the question that arises for me from that perspective, if absolute reality is absolute, none of this is really, in some sense, is really real.
Right.
So why do this? And now it occurs to me, I guess the answer is, well, what we're doing is not really real in the same way, and so it all fits.
Right. Ramdas has a guru, Maharaji Nimkroli Baba, that I was blessed to be with also. And somebody once asked him, is this life real or is it not? He says, it's completely real, it's completely a dream, and it's both at the same time. He covered all the bases. Right? Okay. And if you're living in that reality that you see it only as a dream, then you'll be acting out of that place of wholeness. But most of us are living a lot of the time in seeing this life as real, right? And a lot of what I've been saying here is about a movement toward being able to not take this so personally. And by letting go of the clinging, we begin to see more of the dreamlike nature. I mean, I'm 82 years old, and I've been noticing, for instance, that the notion of entertainment is increasingly ephemeral. Like the difference between good Netflix and bad Netflix and no Netflix and reading the scriptures and meditating, it's all the same thing. It's like, whether you call that dreamlike or not. And now all of a sudden I have a cardiologist. I mean, I didn't used to have a cardiologist. Now I have a cardiologist, and he's telling me this or that. It's like, well, okay. I mean, so there's a kind of a gradual letting go of I'm me, and this is solid, and it's all. And I think we're all going through that process, right? So as long as you think it's real, deal with the reality. And to the extent that, as I was saying before, that one of the qualities of compassion, of the open heart in general, is spaciousness. That spaciousness, that lack of grasping, is what reveals the empty nature of all phenomena.
And so when words to use for it, but when you realize it isn't real, then you're free.
Yeah. And at the same time, you have deep compassion for everybody who's caught in feeling it's completely real. So I have 5 more minutes, I believe.
We got Tom has had his hand up for a long time. We have another.
Well, and I've got my own little thing too. My advertising and my stuff. Okay, got a quick one over there?
Well, I think.
Yeah, Tom was first. Go ahead, Tom.
Hi, Dale. Thanks for a rich talk. I don't want to take away from your own time, but real quick, you talked about holding loosely or letting go of our desire for particular outcomes, right? And following the election, first of all, I just had to unplug. I'm like, okay, I just need like a rest. But after that, I came to, what came to mind is, of course the election would turn out this way. This is the natural progression of a society built on colonialism, genocide, and slavery. And I'm like, whatever, I'm just like shrugging my shoulders, like I see all these plans that are in place that are quite regressive on, the society we've built. And I realize, this is apathy, right? I'm just apathetic. Like, whatever, you guys do your worst, bring the pendulum back to the middle where it's always wanted to be, whatever. How does one walk that balance? How does one prevent oneself from falling into apathy while on the quest to just let go of outcomes.
Right, great question. So compassion literally means with passion. And in the Bible they talk about the passion of Christ, with suffering. And if you pay careful attention, apathy is a form of suffering. It's not the same as touching a hot stove or somebody punching you in the nose, but apathy is a lack of connectedness. There's a deadness to it. And to feel that you're not fully alive, what is the price you're paying to be apathetic? Now, we're all addicted. I'm addicted to excitement. I'm addicted to knowing. I used to be addicted to a lot of other things. Okay. So the point is, we're addicted to not feeling certain kinds of suffering. And apathy, deadness, addiction, substances are a way of not feeling the deeper fear, the sense of fear of death itself. All fear is fundamentally based on fear of death, and fear of death is exactly where you're not enlightened. What we haven't talked about today is motivation. How much do you want to awaken? How much do you want to be alive? How much do you want to be passionately involved in life? If you want to be apathetic, go for it. You'll pay a price for that. And are you feeling the price you're paying for it? So that there's a balance between feeling the suffering of the world, which is not easy to do, or being apathetic, which has another kind of suffering. And we all go back and forth between those two. Good luck. Let me make a couple of announcements about the Living Down Project. If there's time, I'd love to get to you. I'm going to teach a bunch of workshops soon. They're a summary of what I've been saying here today, but in a lot more depth. The first one is going to be at St. Agnes Church in San Francisco in the Haight on January 18th. And then there's a 2-day version that's the same stuff, but a lot more experiential and guided meditation stuff in San Anselmo, February 1st and 2nd. And then a 1-day one in Santa Rosa, March 1st. And then a 2-day March 15th and 16th on Zoom. It's not in person, but it's live. We have a speaker series. A couple weeks ago, Jim Fadiman, an old friend of mine from Stanford days, talked about psychedelics. He's the father of microdosing, in a way. And that talk is on our website, livingdying.org. Next Saturday, my friend Jai Uttal and I are going to talk about the good old days in India with Maharaji. Jai is a Grammy-nominated kirtan chanting musician, so that's going to be a live event. And we have the most complete website on the internet about conscious dying, grieving, caregiving. Almost everything is free. Few things are for moderate prices. Okay. And somebody back there in the back row.
Is there still time?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I just wanted to ask you, I'll just say I think my own journey has been one of coming from my head and into my heart, and it's a journey towards embodiment, that sort of thing. And I'm very aware that of habitual patterns I have. And so...
You're very aware of what?
Of habitual patterns I have. And what I mean by that is I'm very aware of the feeling state of those habitual patterns, mostly which are around anxiety. For example, I'll say sex apps. When I'm on those apps, I feel anxious. I can feel in my body, and yet I keep doing it. It's like a habitual pattern. So in the midst of all of your discussion, is there any reaction to that, or any words you can share around habits?
What app did you say?
It's a sex app.
Sex.
What?
Sex.
Sex.
Sex app.
S-E-X.
Sex.
S-E-X?
S-E-X.
Okay.
I thought that sex.
I still don't know what you're talking about, but that's okay.
Porn.
What?
Porn.
Oh!
Yeah.
Yeah. Porn.
Porn! Why didn't you joke? Okay, now we're talking. Got it. Sex app. I never kind of thought of it like that. The problem with being straight is I don't know what's going on. Okay, so I gave it. I also have a podcast channel, and very soon there's going to be a podcast on there. I recorded already called "Anxiety and Other Useful Emotions," which will be probably it maybe is there. It's going to come up soon, but anyway, it's a very to summarize how to work with anxiety in 2 minutes is kind of tricky. As this question here brought up, there is a fundamental tension in life between the needs of the ego structure and the fundamental groundless nature of reality. So that until one is awake, whether that's the permanent condition or maybe kind of awake temporarily, there is the ego structure needing to be reified, believing Descartes, I think, therefore I am, and the fact that this I who needs to reify itself doesn't even exist in the first place. So that whether it's porn or whether it's anything, this fundamental anxiety is the nature of not being awake, right? And we have all kinds of techniques to not feel that, right? I've tried almost every one, as I'm sure you have too. And it goes back to motivation. So that there you are, you're watching porn or you're not watching porn. Are you feeling anxious? Are you feeling that I'm acting now from a sense of being bothered and want to be not bothered and fix it? Or am I acting from a place of flow and freedom and openness? Now, if your motivation is strong enough, you will be paying attention to that. If your motivation isn't so strong, one will keep falling into, okay, I'm going to do the things to mask my anxiety. I'm going to stay unconscious. I was one time at a longer meditation retreat in Western Massachusetts, and my friends and I were driving back to Cambridge, where I was living at the time, and we stopped at a Howard Johnson's after 10 or 14 days of meditation. My mind was really clear. We walked into the Howard Johnson, and it seemed like a zombie movie. It seemed like everybody was completely asleep. That if you had a big enough computer, you could say Cobb salad, cheeseburger, that there was no free will, that it was all just conditioned response trying to deal with that anxiety and keep it tamped down. What does the anxiety feel like? Where do you feel it in your body? Can you begin to have compassion for that anxiety? What is the anxiety trying to tell you? It's trying to tell you to wake up. Okay. Did you want to make some announcements too?
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ram.
Who is our host? Can we hear from our host?
Yes, your host is here. Please stay and enjoy the company of the Sangha. There's some cookies and fruit and things I've collected on your face out there on the If you have tea, just leave your cup in the sink and I will take care of it. I'll be going around with the Donna bowl. We accept contributions to cover our expenses, and we also we have the honorarium for our Dharma speakers, rent for the center, our quarterly newsletter, mostly to people in prison, helping to defray the cost of our retreats, offering scholarships. And we are about to resume dinners at Larkin Street Youth Services, so there are a number of good things that we good reason to give us some do-re-mi. There's a newcomer's sign-up sheet on the credenza if you wish to get our newsletter and whatnot. And there's also a website, a Google group, which you get various information from. Some people go to lunch around 12:30. Group usually meets by the door. And have a nice day.
Thank you. Any other announcements? Let's see. Sorry, I should have checked to see who's speaking next week.
Joe Kai.
Joe Kai is going. Okay, so I can pop his bio is on the website. I can pop it in the chat, and yeah, I hope to see you again next week. So we gather in a circle for the dedication of marriage. Do you have a dedication? Or do you have
No, please do.
Okay.
The hardest part.
Eventually. Yes.
By the power and trust of this practice, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all be free from sorrow and the causes of sorrow. May all never be separated from the sacred happiness which is without sorrow. And may all live in equanimity, without too much attachment or too much aversion, believing in the equality of all that lives.
So,
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.